lot has happened in the last 12 months since we first reported from Regina Road. How would you characterise the work the council have done in the last 12 months to rectify that, but also improve the housing stock and experience for tenants?
So I think we've done a huge amount over the last 12 months. We have knocked on every door in Regina Road. We've had a repairs inspector there knocking on every door. We've moved or are either in the process of moving or have moved 25 families, those who are in the most pressing conditions. We've also trying to fix as many of the problems in those properties as possible. We've been working really closely with tenants, working really closely with the Regina Road Residents Support Group and talking to them, and so that can kind of drive our response. But some of the problems that in that block are in the fabric of those buildings. So there is a lot of longer term conversations that we need to have. What do we do with those blocks in the long term? And does that mean that perhaps maybe they need to come down? That's a conversation that we need to have with residents. But I think also when you think about the fact that we are looking after almost 30,000 people in Croydon and with another 6,500 people on the waiting list, there is still much, much more to do to ensure that we are treating our residents with respect and that all of our council residents live in a warm, safe and dry home that any of us would want to live in.
You mentioned about essentially knocking them down. I mean, I've travelled the country in the last 12 months, spoken to lots of different councils, Birmingham and others, who say actually some of these blocks are just not fit for purpose anymore. They are beyond their natural life, as it were. Would you describe and characterise Regina Road blocks like that there's a limit to what the council can do, and actually those blocks may have now gone past their usefulness, their natural life of actually housing tenants and families?
I think when you look at blocks like Regina Road, and we've got a few other like them in Croydon, they are over 60 years old, so that will be driving some of the experiences that residents are having. We've spent the last 12 months trying to fix some of those problems in how they're presenting and make sure that people are living in warm, safe, dry homes and that we're treating our residents with respect. But there is a conversation I think that we need to be having with residents to make that decision together with them about what the long-term prospect is around. Is that more medium-term work? We want to be replacing some of the heating systems, etc. But actually one of the options is bringing those down and starting again, but we'd have to make that decision with residents.
The Home Improvement Board reported last few days and has talked about the performance of the council over the last 12 months, and it says that the council does some good things, and you talked about that. It's also quite damning on a number of points. It says not one of the immediate actions identified in the independent report have been completed, that tenants are still living in very poor conditions, and the council is now only at the very early stages of planning the substantial works needed to address these underlying issues. That is pretty damning, isn't it? That the council's not met a single immediate action identified by the independent inquiry.
So one of the things we've done in the last 12 months is set up that board with council residents on it, independently chaired, and we wanted that board in place to hold us to account. They came to our cabinet meeting on Monday, shared some of the things that you have said to us, and cabinet agree with them. We can see the practice that the improvement and the progress that we've made in the last 12 months, but we feel there is so much more to do. That's why we've put in place appointed a whole team of corporate directors right at the top of the council. One of the most important appointments of those, it will be our corporate director for housing, and they have a proven track record of turning around poor housing services, and they will be playing a crucial part. They're already talking to the organisation involved now, but when they start, they will be really driving that cultural improvement that we need to make sure that we're seeing the pace that we all want to see and that our council residents deserve.
You talk about when they start. I mean, we reported at Regina Road 12 months ago, and you still don't have that person in place. Where is the urgency here?
We've had an interim, we've had 2 interims in that role. That was a new role that we created in light of what happened. So there have been people doing that work, but what's important is we've got that permanent leadership, and that's what we will have in place. And that the reality of some of that recruitment where you've got people at that level who have months notice periods to serve, that's why we've always had somebody in place, driving that work. But clearly that permanent leadership will really help drive the department and support the council to be able to make the pace and the improvements that we want to.
Why hasn't a single immediate action identified by the independent report being met?
So one of the things that came to Cabinet was a housing improvement plan, and that sets out our response to the ARC report, and also
but why hasn't a single immediate action been met? Yes, you've set up an improvement board, yes, you're appointing more people, but why hasn't any of the immediate, and the word here is immediate, actions being completed?
So my understanding is that the things that were highlighted in the ART report, like some of the fire safety concerns, all of those things have been done. And what the housing improvement plan seeks to capture is how we want to improve in a whole number of ways, like customer service, like resident engagement, like repairs, importantly. So there is, in some of the things I've talked to you already, how we've moved people, how we have knocked on every door. We've spoken to 650 residents right across our housing as a whole. We've had that repairs inspector so that they have been finding some of the repairs that need to be done. So I think our view is that we have done a lot of things that need to be done, but clearly there is more to do. That's why we're asking the Housing Improvement Board, including residents who are on that, including a resident from Regina Road, to keep coming back to Cabinet. We've asked for that report on progress to come back on a quarterly basis so that we can hear directly from the Housing Improvement Board, because they should be the judge, our residents should be the judge on whether they are seeing and feeling the difference. I know that too many of our residents don't feel or see the difference. That's not what we want. We want all our council residents to feel they are being treated with respect and that they live in a warm, safe and dry home that any of us would want to live in. But as you said, and the board chair said it to us as well, this is a 3 to 5 year piece of work to achieve. So there is much, much more to do.
Well, on that Home Improvement Board, one of the things that stood out for me in that report was it said, we have heard some examples of shocking rudeness and inhumanity. Given the inhumane conditions that the council forced tenants to live in when we reported 12 months ago, it's an absolute failure, isn't it, on the council's part that the board are still finding people being treated with inhumanity and rudeness. That is a failure, isn't it?
It's a completely unacceptable. It was what we felt at the time and what we still feel now. Our council residents...
But it's still happening.
Our council residents...
Council leader, it's still happening.
Our council residents are paying customers. They deserve to live in a warm, safe and dry home, and they deserve to be treated by respect. And I am very clear, and the political leadership of this council is very clear, that that is what our council residents deserve. That is what we want to see, and that is the change that I expect culturally, so that all of our council staff who are supporting our care, there's no more intimate service than we can be providing than putting a roof under over people's heads, and that is absolutely our expectation, and that is the change that we need to see. And I agree, we need to see it quickly.
You talked about paying customers. People are still living in poor conditions in Croydon. The council has not done enough, according to this report, to address that, and yet you're about to increase rents by 4.1%. How can you expect tenants living in the kind of conditions we've reported on to pay more rent to you?
I understand why residents will feel the way they do, particularly given what has happened in Croydon, but I think it's really important to remember that council social rents in Croydon are below average, and that it is the government expectation that we make this rise. You're speaking to other social landlords. You will know that almost every social landlord in the country, except a very few exceptions, are also making this increase. And importantly, I think it's really important to make the point.
But very few social landlords.
It's really important to make the point.
Make people live in conditions that you make them live in, though, council leader.
This is a really relevant point to your challenge. That increased funding is vital in terms of being able to achieve financially the kinds of improvements that we are talking about and that I want our council residents to experience.
Well, that is a really good point, because what you're effectively saying there is that to improve the quality of people's homes, it's the tenants that have to pay for it. The tenants have to pay to improve the properties that you've been allowed to run into the ground and people to live in appalling conditions. It's tenants having to make those improvements.
So funding and investment for all social landlords, for councils who are social landlords, comes from rents. That's where there's no money coming from government to be able to do something about the kind of conditions that you're seeing right across the country. That is the source of income. It's kept completely separately, ring-fenced budget to make sure that's properly invested and goes straight back to the staff and the repairs and the maintenance and the improvement of those homes. And that's why, with all the rising costs that we're seeing around us, that's why we desperately need that money to be properly invested back in making those improvements to the physical environment, but also that cultural change that we need to see in terms of the service we're providing to our council residents.
You talked about social landlords, and you're right to say, I think ITV News research has found that 89% of councils across England will be increasing rent by 4.1%. But not every council has put tenants through what you've put your tenants through. And there are tenants who will be paying 4.1% more in rent in other parts of the country, and they live in a safe, decent home. You'll be asking people to pay 4.1% more in rent, and lots of them aren't living in safe, decent homes. And how is that fair?
We're very clear about what we have done in the last 12 months and the change that we expect. I absolutely understand the challenge that you're putting me on behalf of our residents, and on behalf of our residents as the council leader, I want to see that change, and I want to see it quicker than we are seeing it at the moment. And politically, we are doing everything we can to make very clear our expectation and to drive that change that we absolutely need to see. You are right, and I am saying that I understand that our council residents are paying customers, and that is the attitude that I want this council to put to our council residents, so that they are treated with respect and that every one of our council residents lives in that warm, safe, dry home that all of us would want to live in.
Finally, you're not standing in the election in May. You won't be council leader from then. You've been here not that long actually, and you almost inherited this problem in many ways as council leader. Can you honestly, hand on heart, say you believe the people that work in this building, the people that work at this council, at their core, really understand this problem, but on top of that are actually capable of changing it? Because you inherited some awful problems beyond this, and you've had to come in many ways clean up the mess here. How bad is it in there, really? Because from the outside, it looks like a mess.
So I took on the leadership of this council 18 months ago, and we were in emergency financial measures. We were then projecting a £64 million overspend. We are not the council today of the council that I picked up at that point. As things stand today, we are on track financially. We have just set a deliverable budget for next year, and I have just completed the recruitment of that top team of corporate directors who will support the chief executive, who collectively will support the new elected mayor when they come in post. I'm handing over to that mayor a much more stable, a much more secure organisation with a professional set of advisors in council managers to be able to support that mayor and to support their mandate, one part of which I am sure whoever that is to continue the drive that we have started to ensure that our council residents get the service that they deserve and the respect that they deserve and are living in warm, safe and dry homes.
But finally, you've committed to dealing with this, and to your credit, you have come and spoken to us every time we've asked you to about this. It's not a great vote of confidence though, is it, council leader, that just as you're about to start solving this problem, you're off and you're handing it over to someone else? Why aren't you staying here to do this job, to see it through? So in a year, 2 years, you talked about 3 to 5 years, that this problem isn't solved. It isn't a great deal of confidence, is it, in the people you work with, that a year into this transformation process, you're just going?
I think I have achieved, together with my cabinet, a huge amount in the last 18 months. I've set out to you some of the most difficult circumstances imaginable that I'm not sure that barely any council leader in the country has had to contend with. And I have been dedicated to, frankly, nothing else over that 18-month period. And I think taking the council from where we were, the circumstances I've described to you, to where we are now, gives that new elected mayor with a powerful mandate, to do it.
Why don't you want to see it through? Surely, if this matters, if you've confidence in your ability, confidence in the team behind you, you'd want to be the one to sort this out. You inherited this problem and you want to see it through. And the fact is you're leaving before it's even barely got started.
I think I have demonstrated in the way that I have operated, and as you said, this is the third time that we are speaking in the last 12 months. And I think I've demonstrated through how I'm speaking to you, through what I've done in the last 18 months. I am now handing over something much better than what I picked up, and I know that the Labour candidate standing for mayor will put tenants and the interests of tenants at the very heart of what they will do if they are successful, and that transition, I know, would be seamless, and they will build on exactly what we have started to do. There is so much more to do, and whoever takes over will have to have this as a priority, and I have certainly set the foundations for that to be the case.
Okay. Amida Ali, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.